Well, ladies and gentlemen, China has recently cut off the United States access to certain critical rare earth minerals that go into phone batteries, smartphones, and other important military technological devices. And so this is just another step in the trade war. Where does this take us? Does Trump use this as a way to say we need to scale up the rare earth mining? And it's not just the mining, it's more so the refinement, which does have hazards in terms of the environment that we're going to have to get around if we really want to be free from the Chinese when it comes to rare earths. They say it's around 70 to 80% of our rare earths from China. It's even more than that when you look at the ones that come from other countries that are refined by the Chinese. We have large rare earth deposits in the United States. The problem is the refinement of them, the complex process. We don't have the manufacturing to be able to do it properly and at a scale that can meet our demand in a timely manner. So even when we have like the big areas and the big deposits like Mountain Pass in California, a lot of the times it gets shipped to be refined in China. And so that's a major problem. And the Chinese know that that's one of their pillars that they can use in this trade war with the United States. Guys, I'm going to ask you right now, please like the video. It's very critical. It's almost as critical as these rare earths. But these rare earths, this is what Trump is going to do. This is what I think is going to happen. Number one, the reliance on China for the rare earths in terms of the refinement, it must stop. So there's going to have to be significant U.S. buildup. Now, the whole thing with China restricting the U.S.'s access, it's just part of the trade war. They're trying to gain leverage. I'm a little bit concerned about the trade war. I think the United States still certainly has the leverage, but people are underestimating how far the Chinese are willing to go. At least I think the Chinese are willing to go to have a good posture on the global stage, because that's what they're really obsessed with. And they're very honorable people, and they don't really care if their citizens suffer a ton in terms of economic turmoil if it allows them to have a more favorable outcome in terms of this little jousting session with the United States, which is a trade war. This is what it is. It is a trade war. So now it's not this little escalation thing. It's a full-blown trade war. So we're going to have very likely a winner and a loser. I'm guessing it's probably going to be a pretty complicated deal when it gets done in terms of some type of trade renegotiation. There's probably going to be concessions by both sides, but I think there's going to be more by the Chinese. The problem is, and we saw a few days ago, there were rumors that, well, Trump was taking some of the tariffs off the electronics and the semiconductors in China. Now Trump's saying, no, that's not true. Some things are a little bit hazy, but even if that were true, that's only 25% of the imports from China. So 75% of the imports are still being tariffed at 145%, and then China has 125% tariff on our goods. That's all through escalation of this trade war. Now you can see the United States has redirected $15 billion in foreign aid to jumpstart domestic rare earth refining industry, and that's the key thing. You have to be able to refine the rare earths, and we need to deregulate, because it is an environmental problem in terms of doing this. This is why China is able to have such a huge control over the rare earth industry, and that's not even mentioning Greenland. And with Greenland, it's not even just the rare earths, by the way, because they say, well, rare earths aren't really rare, but Greenland also has a ton of uranium and a ton of zinc, and it is also true that Greenland has the largest untapped deposit of rare earth minerals in the world. It's in southern Greenland, so that is true as well. So that's why we need Greenland, but it's even more with Greenland with all of the Arctic control. I mean, right now we barely have any footing in the Arctic, just Alaska, the northern part of it. But once we get Greenland, it's going to be, that's why Trump's been stressing we need Greenland, and he's going to utilize this rare earth reliance on China as another example as to why acquiring Greenland would be strategically advantageous for the United States. Now you can see this is exactly what we want to see. We want to stop the foreign aid. We want to invest in the United States and become self-sufficient and stop the reliance on China. We're cutting off $15 billion of foreign aid, and we're investing it into the refinement of rare earths in Wyoming, in North Dakota, in California, where there's huge deposits. And this is exactly why we elected Trump. And so even under Obama in 2010, because remember, they stopped doing the rare earth extractions in Mountain Pass, which is a massive deposit of rare earths in California, in 2002. That would have been under W. Bush. And then in 2010 under Obama, they started it again because they're like, well, China has this ridiculous control over it. They foresaw it even under Obama. So they kickstarted it again. But we still have problems to where we'll extract the rare earths from Mountain Pass, but then they get shipped for refinement to China. That cannot happen. It's basically just mining in China anyways, because you need China to refine them, which does have the environmental factors which have to be cut through immediately. And look, if you want to get around the regulations, then that's why we need Greenland. We'll be able to do it on Greenland and not have to deal with any of that stuff, because Greenland would just be a territory. We wouldn't have to really follow the exact U.S. law if Greenland is just a territory. So there's a number of ways you could potentially do this, but Greenland is down the line. There's really not going to be a ton of mining out of Greenland, even if we acquired it within the next year anytime soon, because it all has to be set up. The infrastructure does. In the United States, it's a lot easier to do it quicker. And look, China is going to utilize this. We know the leverage that they have over the United States. It has more so to do with the amount of treasuries that they own. And we saw what happened. I would imagine that China and other countries probably wanted Trump to panic and immediately stop all of the tariffs. And whether or not you want to say Trump panicked or he didn't panic when it comes to the global reduction in tariffs to 10% outside of China, a lot of that came from what I would call a death indicator, which was the stock market. I wouldn't say crashing, but there was serious turmoil in the stock market where it was going down by 4 or 5%. You guys remember Thursday, Friday, and then the Black Monday, which I think it was obviously not a Black Monday. It's just people be hyperbolic about it, over dramatic, because that's just how the internet works nowadays. But people thought it was going to be a really bad Monday. And the problem is we saw the 10-year yield spike, which is not a good indicator when you're dealing with stock market turmoil. It should be going the opposite way. And that was because not just China, but other countries like Japan sold and dumped a bunch of their treasuries. And so when that happened, that's when Trump said, oh, we're going to have to rethink this a little bit. And so it's there's a proactiveness to what Trump was doing, but it didn't save the Chinese. He just upped the tariffs and attacked China even more. Now, it did help the other countries because it alleviated the tariffs off of them, and it got brought down to a 10% tariff. And now there's negotiations with all these countries. But the point of it is China dumped all their treasuries to put pressure on Trump, and he raised their tariffs. Now, we don't exactly know because the thing is, everyone keeps talking about these semiconductors from China. Well, Trump already exempted the semiconductors in Taiwan from being tariffed. When you look at the semiconductor industry, we are so reliant on the Taiwanese to produce these semiconductors for us because they have a huge manufacturing company that does this. That's why Biden passed the CHIPS Act. The problem with the CHIPS Act is there was no real incentive to invest into the United States. It was still cheaper to produce the semiconductors in Taiwan. That's why Trump threatened the tariffs on semiconductors. If you guys remember, he did threaten tariffs on semiconductors back in, I want to say February. It was very early on. This is when Trump really had the trade war going. It's not even a trade war, but it's just like a situation going on with Mexico and Canada, and then also China. But then he also said, I'm threatening mass tariffs on Taiwan. The Taiwanese said, all right, we will invest around $100 billion, like $170 billion total in the United States domestic production of semiconductors. We'll do that. And so Trump then, when he put a massive tariff on Taiwan, because he based the tariffs off of the deficit with the countries, and Taiwan's a very small country, they're going to have obviously a big surplus with us, because there's a lot of U.S. customers to sell to, especially with semiconductors. He exempted the semiconductors, so it's not surprising. The thing that was surprising was all the electronics, which is a really bailout to big tech, if that is true. Exempting and it's not an exemption. He brought the tariff back down to 20%, which is what the flatline tariff was on China when he first took office in his second term. It was a 20% tariff on China, and it was tariffs on Canada and Mexico, which got brought down, but then he put auto tariffs on them as well because they originally agreed to do what he demanded. But I don't know what's going on with that. I think there probably was maybe a deal, because the thing is Apple is investing a ton of money in U.S. industry, and there's been a commitment there. So Trump's got a good relationship with them. This is since Trump's taken over his second term. But I just wonder if there's maybe another deal coming or an announcement coming to where Apple will ramp up production, because you would think, this is a huge thing for big tech, and people are worried, well, what does this do for small businesses if you're just allowing certain sectors that help big tech, like technologies, to be exempted from these tariffs? This will all be explained, I'm sure, but I would imagine there's probably going to be a huge domestic investment into manufacturing in the United States by Apple. And the production of iPhones really, it's a complete misnomer in terms of the idea that, well, it costs all this money to produce the iPhone, all this manual labor. It doesn't. It's very, very cheap. And it's going to be even cheaper now with robots and AI and things like that. So I just wonder what the total story is there. But the point is, we need to ramp up domestic rare earth production. We know this. We need Greenland for security. It's not even just the rare earths on Greenland. It's also the zinc. It's also the uranium. And there's just so many key things on Greenland. And Greenland is the next Alaska. And rare earth deposits in the United States, like in Wyoming, North Dakota, California, Nevada. There's a ton of uranium now reportedly found in Nevada. This is all huge stuff, and it all needs to be mined, and this is big. So that's really the point of it, and Trump knows it. That's why Trump is taking all this foreign aid. And it's like, well, USAID was used as soft power. Well, what are we getting for it exactly? You're giving money to these African countries. How is it soft power? We're not getting anything back. See, at least the Chinese are able to extract, well, they do it through predatory loans, but they're able to extract resources from Africa because they give countries these ridiculous loans on low interest, and they can't pay it back. And they say, well, we got to take something from you then to be able to pay it back. And that's how it works. We don't do any of that. It's like, oh, we have soft power. In terms of what? It's like democratic influence? Come on. The point of it is we gave away too much foreign money. The money is being invested into the United States. We have to refine our own rare earths to be able to be untethered from the Chinese. And we need Greenland. We'll be able to do it a lot easier in Greenland without regulations. So this is all very important. And so this is really why we elected Trump, to be able to be a self-sufficient country with our massive economy. And it's just another step in the direction. But China, this is what they do. They dump all their treasuries to trigger a death indicator. Now they're restricting our access to rare earths, which it was that the storyline of Black Ops 2, the video game that came out in like 2012. Black Ops 2 was a semi, near futuristic game to where they said this was 2012. In 2025, the US and China would go into a Cold War over China restricting rare earths. But that's not the same situation. We're not going to go to a Cold War with China, because this is more brought on by Trump to level the playing field in terms of trade. So we'll work something out with China. They want to restrict the rare earths. You know what? It's actually a good thing. It is. And it's not cope, because we have to expedite the mining of these rare earths in the US. It's important. And also it gives a reason for Trump to say, listen, we need these deals. We're going to have a rare earth deal with the Russians, possibly in the Donbass. That's going to be able to come together if there's a ceasefire and a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. We're going to have another rare earth deal with Ukraine. They've got just a crazy number of deposits. They estimate $15 to $20 trillion worth of rare earths. And there's been some holdup on that. Zelensky wants to be admitted into the EU. Ukraine does, that is, under Zelensky. And they're saying, well, no, the United States cannot have control of our resources and our gas, because then technically we're not a sovereign country and we wouldn't meet the requirements to joining the EU. We'll see if it ends up happening. The point is, we're trying to diversify our rare earth portfolio through Greenland, through the Donbass, through Ukraine, through mining in the United States and refining the rare earths in the US, and not shipping them off to foreign countries like China to refine them. Because if you look at around 90% of our rare earths, they come in some way from China. Now, they might originally be mined in other countries, but then they get shipped to China for refinement. So they have huge controls over it. And it's something similar dynamic with cobalt and Africa and what China's done in there with Belt and Road and the loans and all of the extractions, because these poor countries like the Congo, they cannot pay back the infrastructure investment by the Chinese. And so China gets to extract all of their cobalt, which is extremely important. So we will see what happens. But listen, this is like ripping the Band-Aid off. The Chinese are doing us a favor with the restriction of these rare earths. There has to be an immediate push by Donald Trump to annex Greenland and to develop refinement and all of the industry within the United States when it comes to the extraction of rare earths, and keep it within the United States. Whether it's this crazy environmental problem, if it is, well, then we'll do it on Greenland. But we should be able to do this. The Chinese do it. And of course, China plays by different rules. Same thing with the idea of the Green New Deal and all of that, to where you look at any climate graph, when it comes to the CO2 emissions, we've flatlined and actually brought them down. And so has just the Western world in general, like the UK, all of Europe, it's coming down. But you look at India and China and they're skyrocketing. But the Western liberals will never call them out. It's always Americans' fault. It's always white people in Europe's fault for the CO2 emissions, when in reality, both China and India are skyrocketing their emissions, and we've leveled ours off, but we still get all this blame. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.